G'day everyone. Just thought I'd pop in and have a bit of a chat about some news that I saw this morning about a Nikon factory closing down. But I'm going to give it a couple of minutes. Let's just see if we can get a few more people on board, because usually this is not a scheduled talk. I just noticed up there it actually said it was going to be a few minutes or another 60 minutes before it showed up. So I'm going to give it a couple of minutes just to see how many we can get on board. But I want to chat to you today about this Nikon factory closure. But I'm also going to discuss mobile phones and how they're impacting the whole industry. So I thought we'd discuss that because I've got some actual charts and things like that that I also want to discuss with you as well, because I thought it might make an interesting topic. So just say hi if you actually are popping in, just so I know who's here. G'day Max, how you going? Because I'm going to bring a live chat up later too, and we can also have a conversation about this as well, because I want to get your opinion about what's going on and what you think the future is and stuff like that. And there's this direct consequence of the mobile phone. So I'd love to hear your opinion about that. So basically, what we're going to talk about is this. We'll give it about 30 seconds and then we'll actually start, because I'd like to sort of just give enough people a chance to get in. Dave's here as well. G'day Dave, how you going? Good to see you on here. So please say hi guys if you can. Love to have you all on board so I know who's here. Alan's here. Elliot is also here. That's hello, David. I'm going to bring this chat up too, so we'll be able to have questions as we go along, guys, too. But yeah, I've got some interesting things that I've found over this morning. I thought, wow, it's interesting. I suppose a lot of you have heard about the Nikon closing their factory, but I thought we'd discuss that as well. We're also having a big discussion about it in Jason Lanier's Facebook page group. Someone put this post actually in there, and naturally it ended up being a slamming match with people defending each other and having a go at each other. That's not what this is about. I want this to be a general discussion about what you guys think is happening in the marketplace as well, because it is an interesting actual talk. Jim's here as well. FK Irons is here as well. So we've got stacks. All right, so let's get going. So what I'm actually going to talk about is this. I'm just going to switch over to my Safari, and we'll have a look at this announcement that came up this morning, because this was actually announced this morning, and they've said Nikon closes their camera factory in China and blames the rise of smartphones. So in no way do I want this to become a slanging match at Nikon, but I think there is consequences about how I think they've left their run a little bit too late, and I did discuss that also in Jason's site this morning. But I actually think half of this is because Nikon haven't advanced enough in their, particularly their mirrorless cameras. And I'm going to discuss that with some charts and stuff that I'm going to show you shortly, because I think that is really important to understand where this market's actually going and how mobile phones are actually impacting on the even traditional digital SLRs as well as your point and shoots. Now, they're actually saying, if you look at this, that they're relating it directly to iPhone. Well, I suppose iPhone and Samsung cameras are getting better and better. And the interesting thing that I've actually found is that if you go out now, a couple of years ago, whenever I used to go out, say if you travel on the day, like I might just go to Melbourne for the day, or I might go to the zoo or the beach or whatever, you used to see point and shoot cameras all the time. Everyone had a point and shoot camera. I very rarely, almost never now see point and shoot cameras anymore. I'm always now seeing basically mobile phones. And I even do that. I'll often not take my cameras with me, because I'll just say I'm just going to take my phone and just use the phone. And as the phones have got better and better, it becomes less of a real need to take a point and shoot. So let me know in the chat too whether you're actually finding that as well when you go out, because I'll bring that up a little bit later and we can have a discussion about that as well. But when was the last time you really noticed many people carrying around point and shoot cameras? Do you really see that much anymore, or is it basically just that people are going to use their mobile phones? Now, I ordered the iPhone X, which I'm meant to be getting this Friday. So hopefully I do, and I'll probably love to put a review up and show you how good that camera is. Now, the interesting thing this morning is Max Urav put an actual video up talking about he was actually showing the quality difference between the GH5 and the iPhone 8. And to be honest, most of the time when he was showing those images in good light, you really couldn't tell any difference. Like, it was amazing results. He was shooting at 4K 60 because these new cameras like the iPhone X and the iPhone 8, you can shoot 4K 60. And the results from that was outstanding. Now, obviously, when he went inside and did it under low light conditions, that's when you could see a big difference. And also, if you wanted to, say, get the background out of focus using, your depth of field, well, then clearly the iPhone also was nowhere near a match for the GH5. But it does show you how good that these cameras are for just doing quick type work, or even if you were going to use the iPhone X or 8 as a B camera, because you'd be surprised. Watch Max Urav's results that he put up this morning, and you'd be surprised how good the results actually are from the iPhone 8. And I think that's the thing that's actually starting to really kill now, particularly the point-and-shoot cameras, because the iPhone particularly, well, I don't know Samsung because I don't use Samsung, but I know the iPhone 7 Plus that I've got, the results from that, from the camera and even the video, are really quite outstanding for what they are. Are they digital SLR quality? No, they're not. But for probably 50-60% of the work that you're doing just out there, if you're just doing, a birthday party or something like that, the results are good enough. And this is clearly why the point and shoots are being hit so hard. So yeah, make sure you watch Mac's video, because it's a really interesting one to actually watch. So basically what they've said in here is that they're shutting down their digital camera factory. It's in China that they're actually shutting down. It's in the Jiangsu province or something like that. But basically this just makes point-and-shoot cameras, and it also does some lenses as well. They haven't said what lenses there are. So I can't actually say what lenses are actually done there, but basically they're closing this manufacturing down, and obviously they'll take their manufacturing probably to Thailand or Japan to replace what's actually being done there. And they're saying that basically that the reason why this is happening is because of the everyone's moving away from sort of point-and-shoot cameras, and they've gone to using mobile phones. And then they have down here, which is this chart that sort of talks about how cameras have basically decreased. If you're looking here, these are all analog cameras, which are in the grey area. Your blue is compact digital, and you can see that if you're looking at it as we've come further along, the numbers are just dropping away, and they're being replaced by the smartphone, which is basically replacing that point and shoot. And I've got some other charts that I want to show you as well in a minute, because it'll talk to you more about even where digital SLRs are going as compared to mirrorless, because that's a really interesting discussion that we can look at as well. And I don't mean this to be doom and gloom, because it's not, guys. I'm not saying that this is going to affect everyone. Particularly mirrorless cameras are coming out of this fairly well, and that's what I'll show you when we look at this chart. But if you are shooting digital SLR, like what Nikon have been promoting nearly all the time, what Canon are nearly promoting all the time, they're clearly in trouble. Now, obviously, you just wait. I will get trolls now on this chat immediately defending Nikon and defending Canon. But the problem is this happened with IBM, and this is why IBM went broke. They had this corporation mentality that they didn't want to change, and then look what's happened to IBM. And I would hate this to happen to Nikon, and I would hate this to happen to Canon, because it's like I've said to you before, that we need competition. If we don't have competition, we're in real trouble, all of us, because Sony then would stop innovating as well. And like I said, I'm going to bring up the discussion too, and we can go through those and have a chat about this together. But it is a really interesting scenario that's actually happening, and how the whole of this industry is shifting away and obviously becoming more into the mobile phone that everyone now tends to carry instead of their point-and-shoot cameras, which, like I said, let me know in the comments whether you even see them anymore. I certainly don't here in Australia. You very rarely see point-and-shoot cameras anymore. So that's talking about that. And like I said, I had a discussion this morning on Jason's side, and I was actually mentioning in there that I think Nikon has themselves to blame in this case, because they just clearly didn't innovate early enough, and they really should have started to shift away to see what the market wanted and move more over to mirrorless particularly, because mirrorless has tended to stay fairly stable, whereas all the other digital SLRs are actually dropping off in their sales, and I'll show you that shortly in some graphs, because it's really interesting to look at these comparisons to see what's actually going in the marketplace. But like I said, I switched completely from Nikon to Sony because they didn't offer what I needed at the time. They didn't offer me video, for instance, in the Nikon cameras, and I had the high-end Nikon gear, including the high-end lenses, but they just couldn't give me enough where I could do fusion, which was video and stills together, whereas Sony gave me that. And Sony are just growing and growing, and if you look at what they've just done with their new A7R III that's just come out, they've answered the Nikon D850. I honestly thought the Nikon D850 was an amazing release, and it still is, but now Sony clearly have again leapfrogged Nikon with this latest release. So again, they're ahead of the ball game. The A9, even though you'll get a lot of Nikon people and Canon people saying the A9 is not a true sports camera, the A9, I think, is a far better camera than what the Nikon D5 is, and also the Canon, the high-end Canon as well. And even if you watch, I think it was Jared Poland this morning did one, I watched a review where he compared the three cameras together, and most of the ticks were given to the A9. The A9 had more ticks than what the Nikon D5 or the Canon sports camera did as well. So even he had put down that there was more ticks there. He didn't say that the Sony was better. He said, but his last comment was something like the Sony was the most game-changing camera. He didn't actually say it like that, but his wording was around that context. He just said they needed to fix a few things, like they didn't have enough sports lenses and things like that. So clearly Sony are innovating, and they're not really holding anything back. And this is the main difference between how Sony are playing the game, even how Panasonic are playing the game. Panasonic, I've got the GH5, they're not holding anything back either. So Sony and Panasonic particularly are not holding anything back, whereas Canon, look what they've done with their latest releases of cameras. They're holding everything back. They're not giving you what you need. Nikon have done basically the same thing. They probably should have put an EVF in that D850. So again, they're holding features back. Canon particularly are holding video features back because I think they're scared of losing what they've got in their video side, whereas Sony seem to be giving you all of those features in their cameras. Now, you'll get other people that will say, whinge that I've got an A9, and then they'll whinge saying, but I've just bought an A9. Now, Sony have released an A7R III. Will I sell my A9 or whatever? They'll start whinging that Sony are releasing these new cameras. I actually think it's a great thing that they're releasing these new cameras. I'm not going to buy the A7R III at this stage. I probably will eventually, but I'm not going to buy it at this stage. But just because I can't buy it now, I'm not going to slam Sony because they've just released that camera. And I think that's a very short-minded thing. You should be happy that they're actually releasing new things. And this is the issue with Nikon. They're not releasing enough new things. You can't even buy that D850. It's been out for how long now, and there's a massive back order. People are frustrated waiting to get it. And you just can't work that way. So it's a really interesting thing. But let's look at this, for instance. I'm going to show you a couple of these charts. Because basically, if we come over here, I'm going to show you this little chart here. Now, this is new camera announcements by year. Now, you can see what's actually happening here. There's Canon. Oh, can I make that any bigger? I'll just see if I can. Yeah, I can. If you look at this, you can see that really every manufacturer has dropped drastically in what they've released over the years. I mean, drastically. And I actually grabbed a thing this morning which I read that it's saying Sony has released 3 cameras this year. In 2014, they released 17. Now, this is talking about because at that time, a couple of years ago, they were releasing a lot of point-and-shoot cameras and these sort of things that were being released all the time. So it's... And this is why I'm saying even Sony has massively slowed down on what they're releasing. But they have been growing in their mirrorless market, not, well, at least staying stable. And I'll bring that up in the next graph that you can actually see here. But clearly the problem is at the moment that Canon's is right down, Nikon is right down, but they haven't been able to have the mirrorless side of it that has at least stayed stable or even growing a little bit. And that's the issue with... I don't understand why Sony and Canon are taking so long. They should have seen this writing a year, 2 years ago, and they just have constantly refused to innovate and change away from their digital SLR thinking. Like I said, it's a bit of an IBM mentality. So It's really interesting. So they're the announcements that have been made, and I also forgot, but Canon have got a massive amount less, and Nikon have got a massive amount less as well. You can see there that it's not good at all. Well, let me close that one, and we'll look at this next graph, because this next one is really interesting as well, because this... Oh, well, actually, let me bring that up. I better bring that other one back up for you first, because I just wanted to explain something. This graph that you're looking at here is all cameras. So you're not just looking at digital SLR cameras here, you're also looking at mirrorless, you're looking at point and shoots. So they're all cameras here. But you can see that the whole industry really is in a little bit of strife if you look at this. The amount of new releases that are actually being done. It's not good for the industry generally. And this is why I'm saying I really hope Nikon and Canon lift their game, because we need it. We need them innovating to give us more cameras. So that's cameras overall. Now let's just look at mirrorless, because this is a different graph. And the interesting thing about this graph, and this is why Sony is doing so well particularly, is that, and even Fuji, look at Fuji's doing quite well as well there. Basically it's staying stable. So the interesting thing is, if you're dealing with mirrorless cameras at this stage, or that type of camera, it's basically stable, which is a good thing. They haven't had that drop like what they've had with the overall cameras, which is your, you know, I think this might be just digital SLRs, I can't remember, but you can see it's a lot more stable than the actual one, which is your point and shoots, which is just dropping off. So if you look at any of these sort of figures that are actually coming out here, that the mirrorless seems to be staying stable or even growing a little bit. And digital SLRs are sort of about stable, but if you're dealing with your point and shoots, they're dropping right off. And the amount, like I said, of cameras that are being released are really interesting as well, and how much they've dropped off as well. So I'm going to go to the chat, because I want to sort of see what you guys think about this as well. So let me bring this up here. A lot of people just saying hello. Max said point and shoot are dead a long time ago. Yeah, they are. But some manufacturers are just not, you know, sort of saying it is, and that's half of the problem. And to be honest, I also think that digital SLRs are in trouble as well. And like I said, I just recently shot with a Canon 5D Mark IV, and I didn't like it at all. I hated it after shooting Sony. I couldn't stand it. Like I said, I can't wait for the Nikon and Canon fanboys to get on here, and they'll be throwing these ridiculous comments on. I'm just seeing it the way I see it. I'm not sponsored by anyone. Like I said to you guys, I'm always going to tell you the truth. And I honestly think that if you're dealing with digital SLRs at this stage, you're going to be in trouble if that's all you're selling. You have to. Everyone is going to be starting to move to mirrorless. You can see it all the time when you go into chat groups that people are saying they're going to switch. They're going to switch. And Canon and Nikon, for some reason, have just been so blind to this actually happening that they haven't done anything about it. They should have been released. They should have released cameras a year ago. But now they're talking about releasing sometime next year. But guess what? They'll release a camera sometime next year, and then probably Sony will have another camera that's released as well. So they're going to leapfrog them again. They've basically missed the boat, and that's half of the problem. Let's see what we say here. MC Prezzo said, "Uh-oh, Susie has applied for a divorce. She's gone." I know. Look, I've still got Ken back here, guys. Susie's got to come back soon. I've been trying to find her. She's gonna make an appearance soon. What else have we got? Dave said, "My goal life is to be the last person on earth without a smartphone." I'm a geek, and I've got the iPhone X coming on Friday, and I can't wait to get it. I'm dying to get it. I just can't wait. I'll get it before all you American guys, because we're in the future, remember? So hopefully I'll get it really early and I can come online and show you. I might do an unboxing. That'd be cool. FK Irons, simple phones don't have cameras or good ones. Now they match or surpass the quality of many point and shoot. A phone is also an element that you can't live without, your house without. And that's the thing, you know, like they always use that thing about the best camera is the one you have on you. And like I said, the number of pictures now being taken by smartphones, it's incredible. Chad said, "What's up, David?" Hi, Chad. Max Factor said 105 1.4. Oh, I'd love that. 105 1.4 would be incredible. Delta Dave said, "Pushing film channel did a comparison of the film digital 35 MF smartphone formats, and the mobile phone was the loser. It should, and like it should be the loser, but like I said, watch Max's video this morning that he put on with the GH5, and honestly, the GH5 video is really good, and the iPhone 8 was pretty comparable in daylight shots. Have a look at it. I'm DeBrown said, oh, he's talking about someone's in the house. Chad Silford said, sold my D850 to pick up the A9 with the 85 Zeiss Batis. Also, I pre-ordered the A7R3. Oh, lovely, Chad. What a great setup that's actually going to be. And you know what? I don't blame you, to be honest. Like I said, I think that the D850 is an amazing camera, but if I could have a choice between those two, I would definitely get the A9 over the D850, definite. And the A7R3 is a definite replacement for the D850. It's going to be an amazing camera, the A7R3, when it's released. It's like a mini A9, so it's going to be beautiful for that type of work. A couple more people saying hi. What else have we got? FK Iron said, low-end point and shoot really are doomed, and I agree, I think they are. Chad said, the autofocus on the A9 blows away the D850 in autofocus. One reason I just switched over to Sony. And that's the thing, like, it's incredible. I did a dance shoot, and this is a big job for me. It's a big paying job. I did a dance concert here on Monday night. And the amazing thing was, and this is why I'm saying I still would keep the A9 even if I do get the A7R3, because I actually did a dance shoot on Monday, and the girls were running fast. They were running in off the edge of the stage, and I didn't even point the camera at them. I just had to move, and immediately when they came into the frame, remember the A9 has 98% coverage of autofocus points. The minute that they came in, it grabbed focus. I had it on continuous focus, wide area, and it basically got them jumping across the whole thing. So I had them spinning and in midair, and capturing them all in focus, and it was shot on with obviously the 20 frames per second. I didn't miss a shot. That's the first time I've ever been able to get those shots. Last time I took my A6500 because that was the only one that I had that would work quick enough to try and get it, and even that missed that perfect spot, whereas the A9 nailed it. And this is why I'm saying there's no perfect mirrorless camera with Sony at the moment. You still need both cameras, and it was a game changer for me. I cannot explain how good it is. But if you watch my last previous show, I said I've had my A9 in for being repaired. They are now having to send it off to research what the problem is. So there is obviously a big problem with it. But I'm getting a loan A9 tomorrow morning. It's being sent out to me today, and it's coming tomorrow morning. So Sony Pro support has been amazing in this whole scenario. They phoned me today to let me know what was going on, to let me know it would come out. So anyone that says Sony Pro support is no good, I'm lucky I'm in Australia and I've got it here. But if you're in a country where they have Sony Pro support, it's a fantastic system. And I don't blame Sony for that camera breaking. It's hardware. It's going to happen. It's just a thing, and I'm just happy that they're fixing it and they're replacing it while it is being fixed. So I adore that A9, that camera. What else have we got? Keith is saying hi to everyone. Nikon, I said, I used to carry a point and shoot all the time on my belt when I had a flip phone. This all changed when I got my iPhone. Yeah, and I agree. It does. I just, honestly, and this is the thing, I was amazed that people on Jason's site, some of them were actually saying, you know, they basically hoped Nikon didn't survive. That's crazy. I really do want Nikon and Canon to survive. I don't want them to disappear because we need that. So please understand it from that point of view. I do not want those companies to fold. Delta Dave said, Sony, Panasonic, Fuji are all on the top of their game. Yeah, they are. I agree with you. Fuji are doing amazing cameras as well. Again, this is why I'm saying that Canon and Nikon have to try and get into that marketplace. And they're just not doing it at this stage. It's just crazy. I can't understand why they're taking so long. They're seeing all these graphs like I just showed you around them where everything's dropping off, but they're not addressing it. They've got like blinkers on. I just don't understand. Aldrich said, good day, David. Andrew Mullen said, what are you using to stream the camera? I'm using my A6500 with the 24 1.8 lens on it, Andrew. So that's what I'm using at the moment. It does a really good job, I think. Casper said, David, you own 2 A9. No, just one, Casper. One's off for repairs. They're replacing it with a loan camera. I own an A7R II. I own an A7S. I've got obviously the A6500, the A6300 cameras, and I probably will upgrade to the A7R III sometime next year, but not at this stage. I'm still waiting to see what is released next. I want a camera. This is the reason I haven't bought the A7R III at this stage. I want a camera that does 4K 60p. That's why I've got the GH5, because for me personally, now that I've started shooting that, to be able to shoot 4K of a bride walking or whatever, to shoot it in 4K 60p and slow that down to 50% is gorgeous, and I can't give that up at this stage. So I'm just hoping the next camera Sony brings out has that 4K 60p, and then obviously if that did happen, I may sell the GH5, or I might not, I might still keep it, but then I would get whatever Sony has to offer next, if whatever 4K 60p is. That might be an A9S, or I'm hoping it comes out in a A6 700. I'm hoping that's what is released with the 4K 60p. Michael's here. G'day, Michael. Good to see you in the house. Streets of Vancouver said, what additions do you think the RX 100 Mark V would need? Well, it's pretty good even now. Like, they've added, obviously, better focusing on the latest version, but clearly that's probably going to be upped. They'll probably do things like give better focus. I'm hoping that I think it does have a fully articulating screen. No, it doesn't, does it? It's just a flip-up screen, isn't it? I think that just flips up. It'd be nice if it had like the GH5, which folds out and then back. I think you're just going to find it's probably going to have better focusing, and you never know, that may give you better 4K footage, because it is their high-end point-and-shoot camera, so that may give better. So I'd say the thing that camera will add is better focusing, obviously, and better... Oh, thank you so much, Michael. I think you'll find it have better focusing. Hopefully a better fold-out screen would be what I'd love, and it may give, like I said, better 4K footage. What else have we got? Oh, what happened to your A9? It was getting corruptions, Chad. I'll bring it up and show you just so you can see. I'll show you exactly what's going on. It's really weird what's actually happening to it. Luckily, it had 2 card slots. That's one of the benefits of having 2 card slots, because the other card slot, the JPEG slot, was fine. Let me bring it up. I've got to find out where I put it. Oh, it's in the other Lightroom. Hang on. Quit Lightroom. It's in here. Let me bring up Lightroom and I'll show you. It's going to take a minute to boot up, but I'll show you the exact problem, just so you can see what's actually happening. I've just got to find where I put it. Now, where are we? I've got so much work in here that I can never find anything. It's crazy. Where are we? Pro Photo, Sony Staunton Stiglitz, Sony A9. Oh, where'd I put it? You never believe it, I can't find it. Oh, it's floating, that's right. It'll be levitation. Might be up here. No. Oh. That's so frustrating. I'm trying to find it. There's so much work in here that I actually can't find it. I'd love to show you though, guys, because if you haven't seen my other shoot that I was talking about it, it's really... Oh, here we go. I found it. All right, so let me find... I'll just find one that you can look at. Because it's really weird what's going on. Now, I've got to find where they are, the corruptions, because they're in here, but let me just find some, because I know they were with this girl called Matisse. So let me just switch over to here. Let me reduce this so I can see you all. All right, so let me come down and I'll show you where they come in. I've just got to find where they are. Oh, here we go. All right, so if we have a look here at the bottom, if I click into here, see these lines that are actually showing up? They're all through the image. Now, the interesting thing is they were in the RAW files, but they're not in the JPEG files. So they actually all go through. Now, luckily, they're not in every image. Like every second one, you'll see there that they're actually cleaning up. But every other image, they're in like that. So that's what's going on with it. And they were in quite a number of them. I mean, I'm glad it's not a wedding. But the interesting thing is that they were actually not in the JPEG file, so the second card was okay, but they were in the original RAW file. So it has been sent off, but I'm not worried about it at all because, like I said, Sony have been fantastic and they're going to replace it for me. It's being sent off now to be repaired. Obviously, they're trying to work out what's caused it, but it's being sent off for being repaired, and they're replacing it with a lone A9, which I'm getting tomorrow. So that's what that problem was. So I hope that was worth waiting for. Sorry about the wait. I just have so many actual images that files I couldn't find it. Let's have a look. Keith is saying, what's up? Altric said, did my last wedding of the year on Saturday and now all my Canon gear is up for sale. A9, come to me, daddy. You're going to love the A9, Altric. Honestly, once you start using the Sony A9, and it'll be the same with the A7R III, it's so hard to use any other camera. Like I said, I was using the 5D Mark IV when I was using the Pro Photo. I'll watch the video I put in yesterday too, because I used it with the A9 and it worked fantastic. But when I used it previously, I used it with the Canon 5D Mark IV and it was terrible. I hated using that Canon. After you've gone mirrorless, honestly, to lose the EVF and everything like that, it was just a nightmare to go back, and the weight of the thing was horrible. I couldn't wait to get back to my A9. So, Altric, you're just going to love it. It's that A9 and the A7R II are unbelievable cameras that Sony have released. I had to thank Sony. Susie is what you I see, my loves. Michael's trying to crack on to Susie. I can't believe you're doing that in front of me, Michael. What's going on? I'm not, fancy trying to take Susie off me. She hasn't showed up at your place, has she? I've got to find Susie because she's disappeared, and all I'm stuck here with Ken in the background. So I've got Ken. He's looking pretty hot, Ken, actually, though. I must admit, look at him. Woo! Oh, I love it. Streets of Vancouver saying hi. Ben's here saying hi, buddy. I know Ben's a Nikon shooter. Get out of it, Ben. Sell your gear and buy Sony, Ben. See the writing on the wall. Get it. Get rid of it. Casper said Susie is hot. I know she is hot, Susie. I miss Susie. I'll have to find her. I just take them on the lake photo. I'm not sure what that... just like them on the lake photo, yeah. Those lines are an alien invasion. I know it's hard to explain what they were. Like I was trying to call Sony and ask them about it, and it was a very hard thing to explain what those little lines were. I just thank God it wasn't both cars, and it didn't happen in a wedding. This is why, and this is so important, guys, you must have backup cameras. And it's great that I did have that second card slot. But remember, it would be terrible if my camera completely failed, but at least I've got a second shooter that's shooting, so it wouldn't be a nightmare. But imagine like you see some wedding photographers who go there with their one camera. Now, if you'd taken the whole wedding with that one camera and you had a failure like that, and I didn't know because you couldn't see it when it happened on the actual camera, you can only see it when you bring it into Lightroom. So you would have been basically stuffed. If that was the only camera you had, you would have been in big trouble. This is why, really, you should probably shoot multiple cameras. Definitely have a second shooter, though. If you haven't got a second shooter, use multiple cameras. What else have we got here? Have you heard back from Sony? Yes, Ben. Well, I've heard back from them today, and they actually have said it's an issue. They don't know what it is at this stage, so they're going to have to send it off for some testing to find out what it is. It might, well, it's not. And just to answer someone else who said, is it a known issue? Chad, no, it's not. Obviously, because Sony didn't even know what this is. So this is obviously a rare occurrence. It could be anything. It might be the reader itself. or the writer could be corrupt. It could be the sensor. I don't know. But clearly it's an issue with just mine. But like I said, you can't blame Sony on this. It's just, you're going to get hardware issues happening. This is the first camera I've had, Sony camera anyway, where it's been an issue. But like I said, I can't fault the way Sony have looked after me. And I'll get a replacement A9 tomorrow on loan. So, I mean, that's all you can ask of someone. What else have we had? I do have the A7 II at the moment. That's Alteric. MC Prezzo said, can you tell what the difference between the 18-105 and the 24-105G on the A7R II and Super 35 mode is? Well, it will be obviously larger, because if you use that, you've got to use the crop factor. Remember, if you're putting the 24-105 on the A7R III, and you've got to then multiply it by 1.5, because basically you're just using that crop factor. So really, the thing is, you've got to remember there's no issue with shooting in crop mode, but you do lose the wide angle part of that lens. So if you wanted to shoot at 24, then clearly you've lost that wide angle the second you go onto APS-C mode. It's the same, basically, though, it's a good focal length, and it's probably a lens that I would like to get one day, is the 24-105 as a general travel type lens, because I love the 18-105 on my Sony A7 and A6 500 or the A6 300. It's a great lens, and that's been one massive lens that I've had a major reviews on when I went to New Zealand, and I showed those results using that lens because it's an outstanding lens. And everything I've heard about the 24-105 is it's also an amazing lens as well. And from the reviews that people have given out there already, they're saying it's actually better than the Canon and the Nikon version. So it's going to be a really nice travel lens, I think, and it'll be a great lens for video. That 105, 18-105 is an amazing lens for video on the A6 500 and the A6 300. So this will be a fantastic all-around video lens on the A7R III as well. Obviously, though, it's only f4, so you do have to take that in consideration. But like I said, f4 is no issue anymore, guys, because you can pump up the ISO so high on these cameras that it's no longer really an issue. So I think that would be a great lens, and it's probably a lens eventually that I'll probably get, because like I said, I do love that 18-105. Just remember, though, like I said, you multiply it by 1.5, so you're going to lose that 24mm wide, but you will gain in the reach. So it will be much bigger in the reach. So, you know, that's a good point as well. I do use my A7R II sometimes on APS-C if I want to keep the file size down. But like I said, the only issue is I'll lose my wide angle. So if I need something wide, I'll then switch into full frame mode. But full frame's the way to go if you can. You only use Super 35 mode if you need to. That is one of the big differences between the A9 I've noticed in video as compared to the A7R III. Because to get the best results in video on the A7R III, you have to shoot in Super 35 to get the best noise. And you had to do that in the A7R II as well. The A9, you don't have to do that. The A9 is fantastic in full frame or APS-C, so it's interesting. It must be that obviously that sensor is so much quicker, and it's given you the ability to shoot full frame. It's still really the only Sony camera that is out there that you can shoot full 4K full frame. So if you do need that, the Sony A9 is the only one that you can actually use in full frame to get the perfect quality. So I still think probably the A9 will be a fraction better than the A7R III in video. But remember, the only issue is you haven't got the profile. So that basically makes the A7R III a better video camera overall. But I think you're probably still going to find that the A9 in full frame mode is going to be a nicer look. Michael said, Sony was never like, I've seen that before with 30 cameras on the shelf with the same issue. I know Sony used to release like crazy. They've certainly slowed down, but everyone has, Michael, if you look at those figures that I showed before. David, have you figured out why Nikon and Canon are still tenaciously handing on the OVFs versus EVFs? Wouldn't the hybrid viewfinder perhaps help them utilize the clear advantages of the EVF? And I know I don't understand that either. I just cannot understand why they haven't gone EVF, because honestly, once you start using EVF, you just cannot go back. And you guys know what I'm talking about that have shot Sony now. There's no way you'd like to go back and shoot a digital SLR now. I mean, you can say here in this chat if you think that I'm wrong, but I recently shot that Canon and I didn't like it at all. And remember, I came from a Nikon background of the high-end cameras, and I'd hate to go back to not having the EVF. It's just so beautiful to use. It's fantastic in low light because you actually see the image. It's fantastic for when you're doing focusing. You can see the exposure before you do it. There's no guessing. There's no chimping. I mean, it is just so much better. I don't know why they're just not doing it. I can't understand. My flash shoe shattered off my A9 under normal circumstances at the end of the shoot. I now have a new A9 thanks to Best Buy. And I wanted to discuss that with you too, and I'm going to talk about that on Friday's shoot, because I wanted to talk to you about the flash hot shoes on the Sony, because I've got an interesting thing to talk about later in the week about that. So stay tuned for that on Thursday for you guys in the US and the UK. Video Master said, if the A7R III is better quality for video in the Micro Four Thirds mode, then what are the advantages of video over the A6500? Focusing. It's clearly going to have better noise. I mean, it's going to have much better noise than what the A6500 has. Video Master. It'll also have better focusing than what that has as well. And it's also got newer profiles too. So it has got the better profiles. It's got the expanded range that you can use now, and it's got S-Log3 that you can use. So clearly it's a better camera than the A6500 for video now. If you're talking about the A7R III, probably now is the best overall hybrid Sony camera that's out there, because it will take amazing stills and it's going to do amazing video. Before that, I would say the A6500 was the best overall camera that you could buy in video and stills. So yeah, I think now the A7R III will be better, but obviously you're dealing in a lot more expense, but I think it's going to be definitely better in focusing. Remember, it's got the A9 focusing, or almost the A9 focusing on the A7R III, so it's definitely going to be better than the A6500. The touchscreen is also better than the A6500 as well. I know even with my A9, the A9 touchscreen is much better than it is on the A6500. Video Master also said, and isn't the A6500 video autofocus better AF, or is the A6 equal to the AF? No, the AF will be better in the A7R III than the A6500 for sure. Michael said, if my A9 acts right, I'll never get rid of it. The video is the best. HD and 4K, I agree with you, Michael. Like I said, there's no way I'm selling my A9. No way. I don't even know if I'll sell my A7 II, because I do like the fact you've got the Play Memory camera apps in there, that I can have that no extended time limit now running that. And it's also got the other things that I use sometimes, like the time lapse. Also, the smooth reflections is fun to use as well, and I use that a number of times to stop me having to use an ND filter. So I'll probably keep my A7R II and probably just purchase the A7 III sometime next year. Or like I said, I may skip that and get what's announced next. I'm not sure yet. If nothing is announced that interests me, I might just probably buy the A7R III sometime next year. 95 said A9 video is a secret game changer, and it is. It's the best video that I've ever seen if you're talking about quality of how it looks. Like I said, it's the only Sony camera that you can shoot that full frame 4K in camera without having to go into Super 35 mode to increase the quality. So yeah, it's just amazing. I suppose the A7S II probably shoots 4K full frame, but the A9 has the better video focusing, and it's also downsampling roughly from 6K or 5K. So it is a better camera video even than the A7S II. It just hasn't got the ISO of the A7S II. I still think it's probably the best one, and that's why I'm hoping they bring out log for that camera. So if they bring out log for the A9, it's going to be incredible. But they may not, to protect perhaps the A7S or 3 or the A9S. Elners said, hello, so how are you, mates? 95 said, I still miss just looking through the camera and framing with the Oh, thank you so much, 95. Thank you so much for that. I still miss looking through the camera and framing with the OVF. No battery though. And yeah, and that's a personal choice, 95. Like I said, I hated it when I went back to that Canon 5D Mark IV. I hated going back to that. I really miss the EVF. I just love the EVF now. But that's a personal thing and everyone's going to think differently. Richard said, hi guys, just came in. 95 said, have you ever just hashtag your company and seen who has posted your images? How do you treat that? No, I don't worry about it. The thing for me is, look, honestly, you're never going to stop people stealing your images, and that's one of the things with it. I don't even bother watermarking my images because you could clearly just clone it out if you wanted to. If I did find out that someone did it, though, obviously, and it has happened before, where I've contacted them and asked them to take them down, and they have. I've never got to the point of saying I need to sue someone, though. They've always taken them down when I've challenged them, but I'm not worried about it. If it happens, and I'll deal with it then. Michael said, I just sold my A7R II on eBay today to make room for the A7R III, but I was crying. Look, Michael, if you don't need to keep the A7R II, I wouldn't see a hesitation of selling it. It's just for me, I do like that Play Memories hack because remember, I shoot a lot of videos, so for me to be able to keep that running, and I'm using that on the A6500 now, to have that running where it doesn't turn off after 30 minutes is so important. So, you know, I may have to keep these older cameras. Oh, Tony, thank you so much. He says I need to get some razors. It's because I'm missing Susie. It's stress from not seeing Susie. Yeah, so I don't think I'll sell my A7R II. I think I'll just upgrade the A7 III and eventually and keep the A7R II, I think. I might change my mind. 95 said, bam. I think I saw you sold it for 2,000, Michael. So that's a good price for that camera. That was with the grip though, wasn't it? So that's still a good price though. 95 said, log is to protect FS from the A9. Yeah, and you're probably right. I think that's why they haven't put anything like that in there. Because like I said, the video from that A9 is incredible. Altric Wilson said, looking to get a macro for Sony, what options are there? Well, really, the 90mm, but I don't use that. I use the 35 APS-C one, Altric, and it's dirt cheap. I think it's a 35, and it might be 3.5. I can't remember what the focal length is on that lens. I'll just come up and let me see it. Just let me see if I can Google it for you. Just so I can bring it up. It's this one here, so Altric. So this is the one that I'm using, which is the it's the 30mm. Just let me drag that over. It's the 30mm 3.5 macro, and it's $278 US. So that's the one that I'm actually using, and I find that's honestly fantastic. But it also depends too. It also depends too on what your macro shooting is. Remember, I don't go out and shoot bugs and all these other things. If you're shooting into insects, you need a longer one than that. There's the 50 macro as well, which is quite cheap. Or if you want to get a really good macro, the 90mm is a really good one as well, but then you're starting to deal with more expense. But because I'm only ever shooting things like wedding rings and stuff like that, that 30mm macro is perfect for me. And I just shoot my camera, I shoot it using the A6500, or if I'm using the A9 or whatever, I just go into 35mm mode and it's fine. But I really like that lens. It's great and it's cheap. Let me just go back to this down here. What else? 95 said, I will keep my A7R II as a great video camera too. And that's the thing, it is a really good video camera because of that Play Memories hack. I really wish they put that in the A7R III. It's a bummer that they've taken that off. What else? 95 said, you don't need new razors, just need to step closer to the razor. My head's got less hair than here. Tony knows all about it. Oh, I love it. Michael said, I really just wanted the A7 or 9.3 because of the AF and the 42. 10 frames per second doesn't hurt either. Look, fantastic, Michael. And also, if you're shooting flash, obviously, if you're going to shoot flash, that's going to be the camera to get because you can shoot the 10 frames per second. That's the thing that the A9 lacks. It'll only do 5 frames per second, so there's a big difference there. Like I said, but you're in a good place because you've got both. You can't go wrong. Where you struggle is if you can only have one or the other, Michael. So that becomes then an issue because it's very hard to work out whether you want to have the 42 megapixels or whether you'd like to have the A9 and have the 23 or 24 megapixel camera file size and the better frame rate. Like it's a really hard choice. It's tough if you only have that. Yes, Altric, that it is 1-to-1. 95 said, seriously, that 90mm is the sharpest lens I've ever used, and it is. It's incredibly sharp. A lot of people use that for their portraits as well. The only thing you've got to understand with that 90mm macro, it is a macro, and it's going to be fairly slow in focusing compared to using say an 85mm lens if you are using it for portrait type work. So that's the reason why I wouldn't use that, because the focusing for me has to be quick, and it is slow. Using that macro 90mm macro lens is slow. It's a bit better on the A9, so it'll also be better on the A7R III, but anything other than that, it really is slow. But it's still slower than using, say, an 85 1.8. What else have we got? 95 said, R3 for me is really down to dual memory cards and the better EVF. Yeah, the dual cards can be a big thing because remember, just like I've said to you, I've had that issue with the A9. I would have had that protection of having the JPEGs on the other card were okay. So there's very little chance that you're going to get both corrupting. So that is a big thing now that really I think all Sony cameras probably from this stage, perhaps not the A6000 series, but all their other cameras I think now are going to have the dual slots, which is a really good thing. What else have we got? Elliot said, unrelated question, David, if I may, what's your camera mode for point and shoot event situation for a flash? Do you ever put the flash on TTL? No. Not for events. I always set for instance, if I'm doing wedding works and stuff like that, I always have a pre-to-go sort of setting that I'll set. Usually I'll have my assistant stand where I want them to stand, which is equivalent to how I'm going to sort of have everyone in the shots, and I'll do a test shot, fire it off. I'll always shoot then basically in manual mode, and I'll set in manual mode on my camera. The reason why I'm doing that is because TTL will vary the exposure all over the place. So if you're dealing with wanting to have all of the images basically roughly the same, and remember for your wedding images you want consistency, so if you're going to have consistency in all your images, you don't want the flash exposure changing all over the place, and this is what's going to happen. So you really should be shooting manual. Set your shutter speed and aperture and use a manual flash exposure and keep your distance away the same each time, and then all of your images for the whole reception or whatever you're doing are all going to look the same, and that's what you want for that type of thing, so that they are all basically identical, and it makes your editing a lot easier, and it also looks much more professional having consistency through your whole shots. So yeah, don't use TTL. If you're going to use TTL, just use it as a initial exposure balance to get it, and then switch over to manual. Michael said the 90 on the A9 is much better. Yeah, I've heard that it is much better. I don't have the 90mm, but I've heard it is much better on the A9, which should make it better on the A7R II as well, Michael. 85 GM only for portraits, and the 50 Zeiss. That's beautiful. Like I said, my favourite sort of lens for fast focusing and sharpness is the 55 1.8. That lens is insane. It's that sharp, and it's also the quickest focusing, and also the quickest focusing in low light as well. That's my go-to lens for low light situations. What else have we got? You meant the 55, he's saying there. All night. Presso is going to bed. Good night, mate. Streets of Vancouver night. He's saying good night. Damn, I need an assistant. Yeah, you do. I mean, or if you haven't got an assistant, 95, just ask someone in the audience, ask someone in the reception just to stand there while you do that test. Anyone will be willing to do it. Once you have your exposure set, remember all the lighting is consistent in these areas. So once you've got that exposure set, you don't have to change it. And that's the way you have to think. But just make sure you don't vary your distance from your subject, though. That's the secret. Michael said, David, how many lenses do you use for weddings, and do you use the same lens over time? Yes, look, I take a few lenses, but I can tell you 90% of the time I'm using the 35 Sony 1.4, I'm using the 85 Batis, and then I'm using the 55. It's in my pocket or something that I can bring out in the reception if it gets very dark. That's what I'll immediately go to. The second I go outside and we're shooting, say, the formal parts of the ceremony, I'll still be using usually my 35, and then I'll start to then use the 70 to 200 f4 because I like to start using the compression. So I'm starting to use that. But I'm finding now that I've got the A9. That's the big advantage with using the Sony A9, is that I can use lenses like the Batis 85 1.8 and shoot at 1.8 outside because I can go up to 1/32,000th of a second. And that's changed my shooting a little bit because I love that depth of field that I can now get. So the main lenses that I'm using for me is the 35 1.4, the 55 Sony lens for low light type scenarios, and also the 85 Batis. I also carry the 16 to 35 as my wide angle that I will have just in a bag for when I need it. And I have the 70 to 200 as well that I'll carry and just use occasionally. So they're the main lenses I use, Michael. But I could do 90% of my weddings, 99% of my weddings really, with just the 35 and the 85mm lens. And I tend to shoot that way nearly all the time now. And I love using those two focal lengths. I love using... I don't like using zooms that much. I really do prefer prime lenses. Elliot said, thank you so much, David, and I needed an assistant for that. Elliot said, no, I mean the 50 1.4 Zeiss is my only lens. Yeah, that's a great lens too. 95 said, I know that's my next step up for my events for my company. It's obviously getting an assistant. Yeah, it is a great thing to have. Vincent said you should try Modelo. I know, I have to see if I can get that. You might be able to get that here. I just haven't seen it. The problem is I've got about 2 cases of the other beer I had the other day, the Coronas, so I'm going to have to drink them first. I should have had one on today when I started drinking. I can't wait to see all the comments I'm going to get from the Nikon and Canon fanboys. Wait till you see those. I'm going to have some slamming ones. The 70 to 200 is f4, yes, and I love that lens. That is so sharp. It's incredibly quick. And honestly, I just don't want to carry around a 2.8 lens. I could afford to. I just don't want to do it anymore. I had that with my Nikon, and I don't want to carry those big lenses anymore. I'm happy with the f4 versions of those lenses. I've got the 2470 f4. I've got the 70 to 200 f4. I've got the 16 to 35 f4, and really, I'm really happy with them. So I'm not changing from those. Tony said, I'll catch the rest on replay. I'm going to head off in a minute, Tony. Anyway, nice of you to pop in, Tony. Thanks so much for the donation too, mate. I'm going to switch off in a second anyway. Any last questions, guys, before we finish? Please check if you can. I'd love you to give me a thumbs up too. Please check if you can the last video I put up, because I put up a video of the Sony A9 with the Profoto A1. They worked amazingly together. I can't wait to get that Sony A1 next year when it's released, because then I'll be able to use TTL and HSS with it. I had to use it totally on manual because it was a Canon version of that A1, but it's fantastic. And if you've got something like the Sony A7R III, which will shoot 10 frames per second, imagine that with the Profoto A1, because that will shoot at 10 frames per second. And I tested it on the Canon, and every exposure is identical. So if you want to shoot at 10 frames per second, you could do that with the A1 on camera, and every exposure will be identical. It's incredible. So seriously, guys, if you can afford it, it may be something that you want to think about if you're going over to the Sony A7R III and you like to do fast flash type work. And I'm not paid by Profoto or anyone to say that. So you might want to consider waiting for the Sony version to come out, and it could be something that you could, pay. It's expensive, yes, but you'll get that feature of going bang, 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 bang at 10 frames per second. Michael said, 95, the Sony 51.4, my favourite. Yeah, it's a beautiful lens. And Michael said it's the only lens I use, Canon 50 1.4. All right, guys, well, we might call it a day. I'll just answer this last couple of questions. Video Master said, professional during the daytime, can I use log profiles and manual settings? But I find that when it's nighttime, I know outdoors in low light situation, no matter what settings I use, I cannot top. Are you talking about video? Yeah, to be honest, I rarely use log profiles at night because of the noise, and I don't do that at all. I'll tend to just use more of the normal profiles, and then it's fine. I don't really have a noise issue. If you use log, you do have to be very careful. You can use log, but you've got to expose exactly on. If you don't expose exactly on, you're going to get heaps of noise. You do not want to be basically trying to bring your shadow up. You know, you want to be crushing those shadows down a little bit in your editing software later on, because if you try and not expose correctly and then increase it later on, you're going to have noise all over the place. That's the reason why I don't use log for noisy scenarios. I'll just use more of the standard profiles, things like that. Video Master said the auto setting on the Sony or the NX1 prior. Yes, he's talking about video, yeah. Yeah, so Video Master, I don't use log for nighttime. I just don't do it because it's too much of a hassle. To be honest, I don't use log that much. I only now use log when there's a real issue with dynamic range. For instance, if a bride and groom were standing in two areas where one's in darkness and one's in the sunlight, and I wanted to make sure that I had the complete dynamic range, that's the only time I would go over to log. Otherwise, I don't. I'm happy shooting more of the flat, your normal profiles. Yeah, so that's the only time it really matters. Video Master, no problem, mate. Thanks for watching. All right, guys, well, that's all for now. Stay tuned because there'll be another video probably tomorrow or the next day. And then obviously I'll have my live chat on Friday morning Australian time, which is for Thursday morning for your time, because I've got an interesting thing to show you about the Sony camera that's happened with putting a big flash on top of it, and I'll discuss that in some later videos. So that's all for now, guys, and I'll catch you all for your next video. Hopefully Susie is going to make an appearance back because I'm missing Susie. Hopefully Michael hasn't kidnapped Susie. I love it. Michael said, thanks, David. Like always, respect you. 10 more hours of YouTube and off to bed. Have a good night, Michael. Catch you guys. See you guys. Bye.